Welcome back to Stars and Gripes, where we expose the activists masquerading as journalists. And there is a lot of that this week, and much of it centres around the issue of dozens of white farmers in South Africa being slaughtered every year.
Just put this on, it's right behind you.
There's nothing this parliament can do. With or without you, people are going to occupy land. We require no permission from you, from the president, from no one. We don't care. We can do whatever you want to do. Who are you to tell us whether we can occupy land or not? We are going to occupy land. South African occupy land. That's who we are.
Well, I could do that. Look, here's burial sites all over the place. These are all white farmers that are being buried.
Well, that was US President Donald Trump confronting the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, with concerns about the sheer number of white farmers being massacred every year. Now, I do want to make the point that I do not think that genocide is accurate here. That word has specific connotations and needs to meet a high threshold. And just because people on the left want to water down the meaning of words to assist their political goals, it does not mean that conservatives should fall into the same trap. Having said that, whether or not these killings meet the definition of genocide is not really the point. The point is that a group of people with shared racial backgrounds are being killed in large numbers, and some journalists in the media are trying to either justify this horror or insist it simply isn't happening. And that is a shock to us here in Australia, because this issue has mainstream acceptance. We have taken in farmers fleeing horror, we have reported on their stories, and we know these people exist.
You know what? I'm so grateful that, finally this is being heard, and that, President Trump has brought it up, because when we moved to Australia 4.5 years ago, it felt like nobody was listening. So it really is, I'm thrilled that it is coming out into the open, and that the world is now going to see what's really happening in South Africa.
Well, joining me on the desk is Gabriella Power, the host of Power Hour, one of Sky's most watched shows.
Jack, thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us on the desk. Now, this issue of white farmers, and I think Donald Trump, he does this thing where he makes mistakes, or he maybe over-exaggerates or overstates a position, which then allows the media to sweep the whole issue away. And that's what he does. But I think as journalists, we should be able to still look at the issue, acknowledge that maybe there was an error in how something was stated. And the clip we just played there of this woman, and Kieran Gilbert did that interview this week, and we've spoken to her many times on Sky News. These people exist, and I'm really uncomfortable with this push by some journalists in the media to either downplay the stories or turn them into statistical anomalies to suggest that the number of them is so statistically irrelevant that it should not even be discussed, that there shouldn't be any legitimate conversation around it. I think it's a very disturbing trend. What are you seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. Look, many people disagree with Donald Trump's approach here, and I'm not here to say that his approach is perfect, but watching that exchange at the White House, it really shows you why Donald Trump was elected and why so many people support him, because he's not afraid to stand up to other world leaders. While South Africa's president has gone to the White House to talk about trade, at the same time that America is taking in refugees from South Africa who are fleeing racial violence, Donald Trump is going to raise the issue with the president. Now, this is part of Donald Trump's transparency agenda. He's not afraid to have these conversations while the cameras are rolling. And as you point out, that here in Australia, we're very aware of the issues of what is unfolding in South Africa. We've had that interview with
And we've given them asylum.
Absolutely. And the reality is that hundreds of farmers have been attacked. There's been dozens of murders in South Africa. And right now, America is taking in 59, or last week I think it was 59 refugees from South Africa. And the left-wing media in America had an absolute freak out about it. There was one commentator on CNN completely minimising the issue, saying, oh, it's only a couple of people being murdered, as if that is somehow okay. And so Donald Trump is up against the leftist media every day in America, where they're horrified that America is taking in refugees from South Africa. And so by Donald Trump standing up to South Africa's president at the White House, he's also coming there with the receipts. He's there showing the footage of leaders calling for racial violence in South Africa. There is vision of white crosses being marked to mark and honour every white farmer that has been killed in South Africa. And so as we heard from that interview that was played on Kieran Gilbert's show, that so many people watching that exchange in the White House were so grateful for President Trump for really highlighting the issue. And although his approach may be unpredictable, maybe bold, it's unconventional.
Well, he makes errors,
of course he does.
As well. And then I think that some of the fact checks are focusing on splitting hairs, and it's not the substance of what the message is. When you've got a government which is pressuring white farmers to sell, a law was passed in January that gives them the power to take it without compensation. You can't have that situation politically without there being an underbelly of resentment. And I understand why there is resentment because of apartheid, but that doesn't mean that this reality isn't happening. Anyway, let's move on, because Whoopi Goldberg took on the issue of white farmers, and she also got stuck on this word genocide and used it as a scapegoat to dismiss the entire reality of the situation. And watch how her brain-dead panel chuckles and smirks while discussing such a serious issue.
So, South African President Ramaphosa paid a visit to the White House yesterday, which turned into a surprise presentation on conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I don't know. It's something that's really uncomfortable to me when there are dozens of people that are murdered. There is that underbelly of anti-white resentment. Yeah. I don't think it meets the threshold of genocide, and I think that it was a mistake for Trump to say that. But they're chuckling and laughing at that, and it is a serious situation. And it's quite obvious to me that the government wants these farmers to cede the land. There is pressure behind that. The community knows that. The community would be seeing that, listening to that, and they're sitting there, they're laughing.
And they're calling it a conspiracy theory. That's absolutely absurd to say that white farmers are not being murdered, that's a conspiracy theory. And it's not just The View. Other media outlets, I should say, covering the exchange in the White House have all almost had the same headlines. Trump ambushes this South Africa's president amid false claims of racism. These aren't false claims of racism. People are being murdered. And you've got people like Whoopi Goldberg on The View claiming that it's conspiracy theories. Again, to your point, genocide's not the right term, but it's still a very real issue. And for Whoopi Goldberg should really go back and actually look at the statistics if she wants to. If you look at the homicide rate in South Africa, it's 45 per 100,000. The homicide rate in South Africa for white farmers is 109 per 100,000. Now, of course, noting that white farmers do make up a small percentage of the population, but the point is that this group is vulnerable and they are being targeted. And that is why America is now taking in 59 refugees from South Africa. And so for this issue to be aired on The View with really no sympathy for what is going on, I think it's just, they're almost using it as another way of slamming Trump for everything. They want to play into this narrative that Trump is a big bad bully, that Trump is awful. Well,
the left loves nuance until it's uncomfortable, until there's maybe more than the surface level story to discuss, and then all of a sudden nuance goes out the window, and they love that broad brush to say conspiracy. But we know time and time again that conspiracies are often proven true when some of these people are pushing that word. Anyway, staying on this issue, again, reporters spent their energy quibbling and fact-checking the semantics of statements, and it led to a heated exchange between one woman and Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
Good to see you.
Hi, good. Thanks for taking the question. Sure. The president showed a video that he said showed more than 1,000 burial sites of white South Africans that he said were murdered. We know that that was not true and that the video wasn't showing that. So I wonder, why did the president choose to show that? It's not true that the video was showing a burial site. It is unsubstantiated that that's the case.
No, it is true that that video showed the crosses that represent.
Which is what the president claimed.
The video showed images of crosses in South Africa about white farmers who have been killed and politically persecuted because of the color of their skin.
The president
And those
claimed
crosses
that
are
it was showing
representing their
burial.
lives. Those crosses are representing their lives in the fact that they are now dead and their government did nothing about it.
If I could get
Are you
my question.
disputing that there's no...
Disputing the fact that the video showed what the president claimed it showed, because it did not show that. But even more, what I'm asking you is who at the
No, it
White
did
House...
show that. It
who
showed
at the
white crosses representing people who have perished because of racial
House
persecution.
verifies the videos that the president shows, and what protocols are in place when there's unsubstantiated information being put out for the world and world leaders to
Yamiche,
show?
what's unsubstantiated about the video? The video shows crosses that represent the dead bodies of people who were racially persecuted by their government. In fact, the Associated Press, of all places, has a picture of that very monument, and the caption from the Associated Press is, "Each cross marks a white farmer who has been killed in a farm murder." So it is...
Again, Donald Trump has opened himself up to these kind of fact checks, and I do think they're wholly irrelevant. Is it a burial site or is it a symbolic site to represent? It's not really wholly relevant, but he misspoke, or whether intentionally or not, whether he understands the difference. And it does leave him vulnerable in moments like that.
And he does do that. We know that Donald Trump exaggerates, he gets a few things wrong, but it's missing the point. But journalists coming into the room, they're really focusing on that because they want to come out with a story to say that Donald Trump is a liar, that Donald Trump is the worst. And really, Caroline Levitt is just so brilliant at highlighting exactly what Donald Trump was pointing out. Really, the facts are is that these white crosses were there to mark and honour the white farmers that have been killed. And just back on The View, Whoopi Goldberg even seemed to suggest that the South African president wouldn't want to come back and continue meeting with Donald Trump in the future, which is absolutely outrageous when South Africa depends on America for trade. America is South Africa's second largest trading partner. I think the South African president can handle a heated exchange with the president. And so I think, world leaders are on notice a bit with Donald Trump. They know they have to be prepared that anything can happen in these sorts of meetings. But Donald Trump is going to call out what he thinks is unfair, whether it's happening in America or whether it's happening in other countries. But with Caroline Levitt being so brilliant and so articulate at really driving home what is the most important message and what journalists should really be focusing on, it's interesting because it really speaks, I think, to why Americans seem to have lost a lot of trust in the media when there are journalists going into the White House, into the Oval Office, and the press briefing room, I should say, and they're just so desperate to try and get an angle on Donald Trump.
We've definitely got a lot of work to build that trust back. But Gabrielle Power, thank you so much for joining us.